Remember when a Vietnam War movie could kick the door in, stare you down for 2 hours, and leave you wondering if you'd ever blink again? That was Full Metal Jacket, released in 1987 by Warner Brothers and directed by Stanley Kubrick. Matthew Modine played Private Joker, Vincent D'Onofrio delivered the haunting Private Pyle, and R. Lee Ermey stepped in as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, the drill instructor who made the rest of the cast question their career choices. From Parris Island boot camp to the shattered streets of Hue, the film became one of the most unsettling war movies ever made. But behind every Kubrick take and every quotable line, there's a whole other layer of weird you were never supposed to know. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about Full Metal Jacket. And stick around for number 2 because one of the main stars nearly ended up in the hospital trying to escape the set. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it'll help keep our nostalgic throwbacks in your algorithm. Alright, let's become some jarheads. Number 15, the role that rewrote the movie. Picture this, a technical advisor walks onto a movie set to coach somebody else and walks off with the role of a lifetime. R. Lee Ermey came onto Full Metal Jacket just as an advisor, the same gig he'd used twice before, on Apocalypse Now and The Boys in Company C, to quietly work his way into acting jobs. Tim Colseri had already been cast as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Ermey was supposed to coach him. Just one problem. Colseri could only sustain the screaming for about 30 minutes before his voice would give out. Ermey could go for hours. So we cut Kubrick a demo tape, a non-stop barrage of improvised insults aimed at extras, reportedly across some 150 pages of material over the whole audition process. Kubrick watched the tape and tore up his casting plan. Colseri got reassigned to the helicopter door gunner, the get some guy, as a consolation prize, and Ermey stepped into Hartman. Once he had the role, Kubrick kept testing him. During rehearsals, the crew pelted Ermey with tennis balls and oranges mid-tirade just to see if he'd break character. He didn't, not once. Then it got weirder. Kubrick, the most notorious control freak in cinema, handed Ermey the keys to the car. Roughly half of Hartman's dialogue was improvised, something Kubrick had only let Peter Sellers get away with decades earlier on Lolita and Dr. Strangelove. Kubrick also kept Ermey separated from the recruits between takes, so those terrified faces on screen, not acting. Just a bunch of 20-somethings who'd barely been in a room with them until Kubrick yelled action. So the technical advisor walked off with Hartman, and the original Hartman walked off with one of the most quoted lines of the 80s. Number 14, the transformation that nearly broke him. There was a time actors used to put their entire body on the line for a role. Back before CGI made it a wardrobe decision. Vincent D'Onofrio didn't get that memo. For his role as Leonard Gomer Pyle, he packed on 70 pounds in 7 months, ballooning up to around 280. At the time, it set a record, topping Robert De Niro's Raging Bull transformation. Kubrick's exact note to him was, "I want you to be big, Lon Chaney big," a reference to the silent film legend known for completely transforming his body for every role. D'Onofrio delivered, but the body doesn't thank you for that kind of crash course. During the obstacle course scenes, he tore the ligaments in his knee. The injury eventually required surgery. That was the physical price. The psychological one hit different. Once he shaved his head and packed on the weight, D'Onofrio said people started treating him like a completely different human being. Strangers would repeat things to him twice, like they weren't sure he'd understood. Women avoided him in ways that they hadn't before. He went from a working New York actor to a guy people stopped making eye contact with in a matter of months. Instead of shaking it off, he fed it into Pyle. That creeping sense of being dismissed, underestimated, looked through. That's what you're watching on screen when Pyle starts to crack. And when filming wrapped, it took him 9 months to lose the weight. Number 13, the Vietnam War, filmed in a London wasteland. Most directors making the movie would have packed a passport and flown somewhere tropical. Stanley Kubrick had a different plan. Kubrick had a famous aversion to flying, famous enough that he basically built his entire career around never having to board a plane. So when it came time to shoot a movie set in Vietnam, he did the only thing that made sense to him. He found a stand-in less than an hour from his house. Enter the Becton Gas Works, a crumbling industrial plant in East London that was already on the demolition schedule. Kubrick walked the site, looked at the buildings, and decided it was Hue now. His crew spent 2 months with wrecking balls and controlled explosives, knocking the buildings into believably damaged shapes. Then they slapped up Vietnamese signs and called it a wrap. And then comes the part that sounds invented. According to Kubrick's longtime assistant, Leon Vitali, the same architectural firm that designed parts of Becton had also worked on buildings in the real Hue. The fake city and the real one supposedly shared architectural DNA by sheer accident. But was it true? Kubrick believed it. He'd seen similar architecture near Hue and noted the resemblance himself. Either way, he used the story in interviews like he cracked a cosmic joke. Other directors flew their crews halfway around the world for authenticity. Kubrick stayed home, blew up some old British buildings, and somehow ended up with one of the most convincing-looking versions of Hue ever put on film. Number 12, the fake jungle that took over London. Building a war-torn city out of a defunct gas plant is one thing. Growing a tropical jungle in East London in the middle of winter is a whole other circle of production hell. Round 1, a plastic jungle shipped in from California. Kubrick took one look and threw it out. Round 2, 200 real palm trees trucked in from Spain. Except London had opinions about that. The second those palms hit gray English drizzle, they started wilting like they'd put in their 2 weeks. Production had to call in the local fire brigade just to keep them hydrated. Round 3, 100,000 plastic tropical plants from Hong Kong mixed in with the real ones until you couldn't tell which was which. Whatever worked. The biggest problem was the skyline. Tilt the camera up 2 inches and you're suddenly looking at East London again, not the Far East. Furst's fix? Stack massive rusted shipping containers around the perimeter. Reds, yellows, oranges, plain steel. Blocked out the skyline and somehow made the whole place look more bombed out at the same time. 2 years later, the same guy would win an Oscar designing Gotham City for Tim Burton's Batman. Full Metal Jacket was basically his audition tape. Real trees from Spain, fake leaves from Hong Kong, an Oscar-winning designer fixing the skyline with cargo crates. Somehow, all of it added up to the most believable Hue ever shot in a country that's never been within 6,000 miles of Vietnam. Number 11, the set that was more dangerous than the movie. Modern movie sets have safety officers whose entire job is making sure nobody inhales anything weird. Full Metal Jacket said no thanks to that idea, and the cast paid the bill. Becton came with a problem nobody briefed anyone on. The 550-acre site had been pumping out coal gas for almost a century, which left the soil soaked in roughly 24 chemicals you'd really rather not get to know. And the cast was about to live in it for months. Matthew Modine's been telling this story in interviews for years, and the details are wild. He'd come back to his hotel after a day of filming, draw a bath, and watch the water turn cobalt blue. Whatever was in the soil was coming off his body in measurable quantities every night. And that's just what was on him. What he was breathing in was worse. Every explosion sent clouds of century-old industrial dust into the air. And a lot of it was straight asbestos. Production trucks rolling through in the morning would kick up enough dust to land on the breakfast spread at craft services. The cast would sip their tea, eat their pastries, and head right back to it. For Modine, some of the damage stuck. He's openly talked about respiratory problems he picked up at Brechton and called it the most toxic environment he's ever stepped foot on. These guys looked exhausted on screen because they actually were. Number 10, the cast that almost turned into an 80s all-star lineup. The cast you remember from Full Metal Jacket is wildly different from the one that Kubrick almost made. It started with Anthony Michael Hall, fresh off 16 Candles. Kubrick wanted him for Joker. 8 months of negotiations fell apart over money, and a year-plus filming commitment Hall wouldn't sign on for indefinitely, which sets up one of the weirdest casting stories in movie history. Val Kilmer wanted Joker, badly. While circling the role, he ran into Matthew Modine at The Source, a diner on Sunset Boulevard, where Modine was eating pancakes with David Alan Grier. Kilmer convinced himself that Modine had already been cast as Joker, even though Modine had no clue the role existed. Kilmer spent the meal muttering obscenities at him under his breath. Eventually, it boiled over into, now you're doing Kubrick's movie Full Metal Jacket. Modine, baffled, went home, called his agent, and found out that the part was open. So he sent in some Vision Quest footage as his audition and got it. He landed the lead because another actor was angry at him over a job he didn't even have yet. The strangest near miss of all, though, Kubrick offered Hartman to Bill McKinney, the squeal-like-a-pig guy from Deliverance. McKinney accepted, started prepping for London, and was actually at LAX when the message came through, don't come. Kubrick had watched Deliverance one too many times and couldn't bring himself to be in a room with the guy. McKinney got paid in full anyway. When a director writes you a full paycheck just to not show up, that's a Hollywood career most actors would kill for. Number 9, the title that saved the movie. Full Metal Jacket almost got released with a title that sounded like a workplace sitcom. Kubrick adapted the film from a novel called The Short Timers by Gustav Hasford, a former Marine who'd written What He Knew. Kubrick read it twice in 1982 and was hooked. There was just one snag, the title. In military slang, short timers mean servicemen that are counting down their last days before going home. But Kubrick was convinced regular moviegoers would hear the short timers and picture part-time employees clocking out of a shift. Hard pass. So he went hunting for a replacement. And the way that he found it is the most Kubrick thing imaginable. He was flipping through a gun catalog one afternoon and came across the technical term Full Metal Jacket. In ammunition language, it's a bullet with a soft lead core wrapped in a harder metal shell. Clean and clinical. Critics have spent decades pointing out that this phrase basically describes the whole movie. Soft kids on the inside, hard military shell on the outside. Kubrick may not have planned that, but it works. Here's the part that nobody talks about. The phrase Full Metal Jacket appears nowhere in Hasford's novel. Kubrick made the title up entirely from a gun catalog browse. A title that could have buried this thing ended up being the sharpest thing about it. Number 8, the ending that got filmed 3 different ways. The sniper finale. Joker pulling the trigger on a wounded teenage girl is one of the most quietly devastating moments in 1980s cinema. It's also the 3rd version that Kubrick shot. He couldn't crack the ending. He filmed Hasford's original from the novel, where Animal Mother walks up to the dying sniper, hacks her head off, and hoists it on the end of his rifle. Kubrick looked at the footage and threw it out. Then he tried a version where Joker dies, intercut with shots of him as a young boy. That one got scrapped too. At one point, Kubrick was stuck enough that he pulled the cast into his motorhome just to ask him flat out, I'm not sure how I want to end this film. Do you guys have any ideas? The director, who ran 127 takes of Shelley Duvall on a staircase, was crowdsourcing the ending from his own actors. The actor was Ngoc Le, a Vietnamese performer in what would turn out to be her only major role. Kubrick ran the scene over and over, tweaking the framing, the timing, the way she begged for it. What stuck, Joker's mercy killing, gave the movie a structural symmetry it didn't get on the page. Boot camp ends with a Marine killing another Marine. The war ends with a Marine killing a kid. Same moral collapse, 2 different uniforms. Kubrick filmed the ending 3 different ways before he found the one that made the whole movie make sense. Hey, half this video so far has been actors getting pushed past what they signed up for. So tell us, what's a performance you watched and thought, there's no way they did that for real? Comments below. And hey, if you haven't yet, hit subscribe. That's how we keep digging up the weird stuff that nobody talks about anymore. All right, let's get back to training. Number 7, heaters, rabbits, and a drill sergeant in a ditch. Vietnam first, boot camp last. The whole movie got shot in reverse. Once the Becton clock started ticking, the cast experienced Vietnam before they ever stepped onto the fake Parris Island. The boot camp sequence, shaved heads, screaming, the entire transformation, got filmed last, with the actors having their heads reshaved weekly to keep the continuity intact. Then the weather came for him. London in winter is not Vietnam in any season, and the cast's breath kept fogging up the camera. Production hauled in industrial gas heaters to fix it. The heaters worked. They also dried the actors' throats so badly that half the cast was hoarse by lunch. Then, the rabbit stopped everything cold. One of the controlled explosions at Becton wiped out a rabbit nest the crew hadn't spotted. Kubrick, the same guy who pushed a $30 million production through asbestos fields in 14-hour days, shut the day down. He sent everyone home. Not for budget, not for safety, but for the rabbits. The man lived on a country estate outside London, surrounded by rescue animals, and reportedly left his caretakers 2 solid pages of instructions on how to evacuate the pets if the house ever caught fire. Apparently, that policy extended to the wildlife, too. Then production hit another, even bigger problem. Lee Ermey skidded his car off the road in Epping Forest at 1 in the morning. He broke every rib on his left side. He stayed conscious just long enough to flash his headlights and flag down a passing driver, which is the only reason that he made it out. The crash shut things down for months, and when Ermey came back, he was still in serious pain. And if you look closely at certain scenes in the finished film, you can actually see it. Ermey barely moves his left arm in some shots, which means a piece of one of the most intense performances of the decade is just a guy who broke every rib on one side of his body, trying not to flinch. Number 6, the lead actor who got away with documenting Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick had a reputation for closed sets. No press, no leaks, no outsiders. Modine walked in, started keeping a diary and taking photos, and somehow Kubrick let him. It started as character prep. Modine was playing Joker, a Marine journalist, so he picked up a small Asian-style notepad as a prop and started writing in it. Kubrick saw what he was doing and didn't shut it down. He encouraged it. Eventually, he started asking Modine to read entries out loud on set. Then came the camera. A friend had given Modine a Rolleiflex before he left for London, and Kubrick, who'd spent 5 years as a Look magazine photographer before he ever picked up a movie camera, told him which lenses to use, what film speed to load, and let him bring it everywhere. Modine wrote about getting yelled at, about the cast unraveling, about pulling a knife on Kubrick to get to his wife's hospital bed. He kept it up the entire shoot. 20 years later, he published it as Full Metal Jacket Diary, a limited run of 20,000 copies. Every one of them basically a contraband document for the most locked-down production of the 80s. There's an app version, too, where Modine reads the whole thing out loud over his own behind-the-scenes photos. Same director who wouldn't allow making of documentaries. Same director who turned away journalists. Yeah, he let his lead actor walk around with a notebook and a camera for a whole year. Number 5, the composer who didn't exist. Movie credits are supposed to be the reliable part. Full Metal Jacket would like to gently push back on that idea. The score, the strange, buzzing mechanical sound running through the entire film, got credited to a composer named Abigail Mead. But Abigail Mead didn't exist. The real composer was Vivian Kubrick, Stanley's daughter. The pseudonym was named after Abbott's Mead, the country house that the Kubricks lived in for over a decade. She wanted the score judged on its own, not waved through as the boss's kid getting a credit. Kubrick didn't want a traditional orchestra. No swelling violins, no dramatic strings, none of the usual emotional cues that a war movie reaches for. He wanted something that felt cold and processed. So Vivian built the soundtrack on two of the most advanced pieces of digital gear of the era, the Fairlight CMI and the Synclavier, both basically refrigerator-sized synthesizers that cost more than most people's apartments. The result wasn't exactly music. It was the sound of a system, mechanical, hollow, and scraping, exactly what the movie needed. There's a fun cameo there too. Vivian also shows up briefly in the film itself, uncredited. She's the news camera operator filming into the mass grave as the Marines walk past. Now here's where it gets ridiculous. Abigail Mead actually charted. A single built around Ermey's drill cadences called Full Metal Jacket, I Want to Be Your Drill Instructor, hit number 2 in the UK and number 1 in Ireland. A fake composer, a real hit, and almost nobody listening at the time knew it was the director's 27-year-old daughter. Number 4, the ending that almost sounded like a cartoon. The final scene of Full Metal Jacket hits you with the Mickey Mouse Club March, and somehow it's the most unsettling moment in the whole film. Now picture that ending featuring a cackling woodpecker instead. That was Kubrick's actual first choice. The Marines marching through the rubble of Hue, singing M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E, is one of the strangest endings in all of 80s cinema. Childhood pop culture echoing through a destroyed city. It works on every level. But Kubrick had a strange, lifelong obsession with Woody Woodpecker. He loved that maniacal cackle. You know it, the you know it. He loved the whole chaotic cartoon energy of it, so the original plan was for the platoon to whistle the Woody Woodpecker theme as they walked through the burning streets. A cartoon laugh in a war zone, somehow even creepier than the version we got. And here's the wild part. Kubrick asked Woody's creator, Walter Lantz, for permission to use the character in every single film he made, for decades. And every single time, Lantz said no. So Kubrick pivoted to the Mickey Mouse Club March. Earlier in the film, Hartman barks at Pyle, "What is this Mickey Mouse stuff?" Hours later, that's exactly what the Marines are singing. Hartman's insult played back at him by his own recruits in their own voices. The grace note? Walter Lantz died in 1994. Kubrick's next film was Eyes Wide Shut. He never even asked about Woody. After decades of getting turned down, he let it go, out of respect for the man who kept saying no. Kubrick lost every fight to use Woody Woodpecker, and every single time, the movies came out better for it. Number 3, the movie scene that took over hip-hop. Now, most movie lines stay where they were born. Once in a while, one breaks loose, jumps genres, and ends up sampled into songs that your parents really didn't want you playing in their car. Full Metal Jacket pulled that off with about 60 seconds of footage. The scene is short. A Vietnamese woman, played by Papillon Su, credited as the Da Nang hooker, approaches 2 American Marines on a street and pitches them a transaction. The whole exchange lasts maybe a minute, but you can feel the discomfort radiating off the screen. But one line escaped the movie entirely. "Me so horny, me love you long time." I'm not doing the accent. In 1989, Miami-based group 2 Live Crew built an entire song around the sample. Me So Horny pulled the hook straight from Full Metal Jacket and turned it into one of the most controversial tracks of the late 80s. The album that contained it got dragged into a major obscenity case. The lawyer showed up, and somewhere in all that chaos, it went double platinum. A few years later, Sir Mix-a-Lot grabbed the line for Baby Got Back, using Papillon Su to finish his own lyric. He raps, "That butt you got makes," and she answers, me so horny. From there, the line was everywhere. For a lot of Gen X and older millennials, the order got flipped. A bunch of us didn't hear that line in Full Metal Jacket first. We heard it in a song. Then, years later, we watched the movie and went, wait, that's where this came from? Kubrick made the movie, and hip-hop stole the line. Number 2, the day the movie collided with real life. Most actors describe a hard shoot as intense. Matthew Modine's description of intense involved pulling a pocket knife on his director and threatening to cut himself open with it. It happened a few weeks into filming. Modine got the news every expectant dad dreads. His wife was going into an emergency C-section. The baby was arriving way early at 7 months. Something wasn't growing right, and the situation was genuinely dangerous. He went straight to Kubrick and asked to leave for the hospital. Kubrick's response is one of the coldest moves in director-actor history. According to Modine, Kubrick started laying out practical reasons why he didn't need to go. He wasn't a doctor, he'd just be in the doctor's way. He might pass out at the sight of blood, and Kubrick wanted him on standby in case anything came up on set. Let me read that again. Don't go into your wife's emergency C-section because you might faint. Yeah, so Modine escalated. He pulled out a pocket knife, he put it flat in his palm, and told Kubrick straight up, either I leave for the hospital right now, or I cut my hand open and the ambulance takes me there anyway. Kubrick blinked first. He'd let Modine go on one condition: get back here as soon as the baby's born. Modine made it in time for his son Bowman's birth. He came back a few days later with cigars for the crew and quietly didn't film for another 3 days. Then came round 2. Kubrick reportedly grilled Modine about the kid's name, convinced that Bowman was a reference to Dr. Bowman from 2001: A Space Odyssey. It wasn't. Modine and his wife had picked the name 5 years earlier. Didn't matter. Kubrick heard what he wanted to hear. He'd fight you over going to the hospital, and he'd fight you over what you named the kid when you got back from it. Number 1. The movie that made the Marines look at themselves. It's not every day a movie shakes one of the most powerful institutions in America. Full Metal Jacket actually pulled that off. For a lot of Gen X moviegoers, the boot camp half of the film didn't feel like cinema. It felt like a documentary that wandered into the wrong theater. Hartman in everyone's face, Pyle melting down, the whole system grinding new recruits into something harder. People walked out of those screenings genuinely rattled, asking the same question: was Marine boot camp really like that? According to the United States Marine Corps, the answer was a little awkward. The film opened on June 26th of 1987. A Marine 4-star named Alfred M. Gray Jr. was in the audience. 5 days later, he was sworn in as the 29th commandment of the Marine Corps. One of his first moves was to order an internal review of the boot camps at Parris Island and San Diego. The verdict, as the story is told in Marine circles, came back as a single sentence: sir, if anything, they're worse. The most insane drill instructor in 1980 cinema was the softer version? Yeah, so Gray took an axe to the whole approach. Less screaming for the sake of screaming, more training Marines to actually think on their feet. The argument was simple. Terrified recruits make lousy decision makers, and the Corps needed people who could adapt, not just absorb abuse. 9 years later, the 31st Commandment, General Charles C. Krulak introduced the Crucible. 54 hours, no sleep, no real food, about 48 miles of marching with full packs. Still brutal, just brutal with a point. Kubrick set out to make a movie about young men being processed by a system. He accidentally made the movie that made the Marines look at themselves. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about Full Metal Jacket that prove the chaos behind the camera was almost as brutal as the war on screen. A movie where almost nothing went according to plan, and somehow that's exactly why it worked. Which fact surprised you the most? Well, let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this one, hit like and subscribe. It really helps us keep these flashbacks coming. Until next time, let me see your war face! This is Remember When.